Right now, this exact moment in the relationship, this specific point in time where things have developed a particular level of closeness or commitment or emotional intimacy is absolutely terrifying for the avoidant person in ways that you might not recognize, because their terror is internal and hidden and expressed through withdrawal and defensive behavior rather than through words or through obvious signs of fear, and understanding that they're currently in state of acute psychological terror helps explain the confusing contradictory behavior you're witnessing, where they seem to simultaneously want you and push you away, where they're acting distant precisely when things were going well, where they're creating problems or conflict when the relationship was actually working smoothly, where they're withdrawing when you thought you were finally getting close. Right now is terrifying for them because something has shifted. Maybe the relationship has reached a point where commitment is becoming expected or discussed. Maybe intimacy has deepened to level that feels too vulnerable. Maybe they've recognized they're genuinely in love with you, and this recognition has triggered all their wounds about love, leading to pain. Maybe external circumstances like holidays or meeting family are forcing relationship into more serious territory. Maybe they've simply been consistently close to you for long enough that their defensive system is screaming danger about the sustained vulnerability this closeness represents. Maybe you've become important enough that losing you would actually hurt, and this potential for hurt is triggering their protective instinct to create distance before the hurt becomes unbearable. Whatever the specific trigger, right now represents a moment where their defensive system perceives escalating threat of being consumed, threat of losing themselves in the relationship, threat of being hurt when inevitable abandonment they expect finally occurs, threat of being trapped in commitment they fear will suffocate them, threat of vulnerability that feels like standing emotionally naked without protection in front of a person who could destroy them. This terror is real, is visceral, is operating at nervous system level, where their body is telling them they're in danger, even though intellectually they might recognize you're safe and the relationship is good. And their response to this terror, the withdrawal, the coldness, the creation of distance, the sabotaging behaviors, the defensive positioning, isn't evidence they don't care about you, but is evidence of how much they do care and how terrifying that caring has become now that things have reached level where the stakes feel unbearably high and where their wounds are screaming warnings that they need to protect themselves before it's too late. Why the current moment is creating unprecedented panic. In the avoidance system, the avoidant person is experiencing acute terror right now because specific conditions in the present moment have converged to trigger their deepest fears in ways that feel more threatening than earlier stages of the relationship. Understanding why this particular moment creates such intense panic reveals the psychological mechanisms driving their current behavior. Right now is terrifying because the relationship has crossed threshold from casual or controllable into territory that feels serious and permanent in ways that trigger their fear of being trapped. In earlier stages, the relationship felt manageable to the avoidant. It was new, it was exciting, it wasn't too deep. Commitment wasn't expected. They could maintain illusion, they could leave easily if needed. But now, something has shifted. Maybe you've been together long enough that people expect commitment. Maybe conversations about future have occurred. Maybe you've met each other's families, or moved in together, or reached some milestone that makes relationship feel more permanent. This shift from controllable territory into serious territory triggers the avoidance panic about being trapped. Trapped in commitment they're not sure they can sustain. Trapped in expectations they fear they cannot meet. Trapped in relationship that's no longer casual, but is becoming permanent fixture they cannot escape without significant consequence. The panic intensifies because their nervous system interprets commitment conversations as countdown to loss of freedom rather than as expression of love. When you bring up where the relationship is going, when you discuss future plans, when you express desire for clarity about commitment, their brain doesn't process this as, this person loves me and wants security. Their brain processes it as, the walls are closing in, my options are disappearing, freedom is being eliminated, escape routes are being sealed. This neurological response isn't rational or chosen, it's automatic trauma response where commitment equals cage. They hear, I love you, and want to build future together, but their system translates it to, you're about to be trapped, you need to escape, danger is imminent. This translation happens instantaneously, below conscious awareness, driving behaviors that seem irrational from outside, but internally feel like survival responses to genuine threat. Right now becomes crisis, because they're watching themselves care more than they've ever cared, and this caring feels like handing you a weapon to destroy them. The avoidant has always maintained emotional control through not caring too much, through keeping people at sufficient distance that losing them wouldn't be devastating. But with you, this strategy has failed. They care. Deeply. More than they intended. More than feels safe. And this caring terrifies them, because in their experience, caring equals vulnerability to catastrophic pain. Right now, they're watching themselves become attached, despite their best efforts not to. Watching you become essential, despite trying to keep you optional. Watching themselves need you, despite building entire identity around not needing anyone. This recognition that they've failed to prevent attachment creates panic, because attachment means you have power to hurt them, means they're vulnerable to loss that will devastate them, means their defenses that have protected them, their entire life, have been penetrated and they're exposed. The terror escalates because holidays or significant dates force public acknowledgement of relationship status they've kept deliberately ambiguous. Thanksgiving dinner, where they have to introduce you as girlfriend or boyfriend. Christmas with your family, where relationship seriousness is implied. New Year's, where future is discussed. Valentine's Day with romantic expectations. Anniversaries that mark time and progression. These events terrify avoidance because they force definition of what's been kept vague, force public declaration of connection they've kept private, force acknowledgement of relationship significance they've minimized. Right now might be terrifying because one of these dates is approaching and they're panicking about the implications, about being seen as committed when commitment terrifies them, about relationship being acknowledged by others, when external acknowledgement makes it more real and more difficult to escape. Their system goes into overdrive right now because you've stopped chasing and they're experiencing loss of control in dynamic they thought they managed. Throughout relationship, maybe you pursued, gave more, worked harder to maintain connection, but recently you've stopped, you've pulled back, you've created space, you've become less available. This shift terrifies them in an unexpected way. When they controlled distance through their withdrawal, they felt safe. But now, you're creating distance, and they don't control it. Don't know if you'll come back. Cannot predict your behavior. This loss of control over dynamic triggers panic. They're experiencing what they've put you through. The anxiety of not knowing, the fear of loss, the pain of distance, and it's terrifying. Right now is scary because you've become unpredictable variable they cannot control or manage through their usual strategies. Right now multiplies their fear because they recognize their patterns are visible to you in ways they've never been visible before. You're not naive partner who accepts their explanations. You've educated yourself about attachment. You understand their patterns. You can name their defenses. You see their games. This clear-sightedness terrifies them because it means they cannot hide behind rationalizations, cannot explain away their behavior, cannot maintain illusions about their patterns. You see them clearly, see their fear, see their defenses, see their wounds, and this being seen creates vulnerability they cannot escape through their usual strategies of hiding or explaining or blaming. Right now is terrifying because your clarity about their patterns means they're fully exposed to someone who understands exactly what they're doing and why, eliminating the protective cover their defenses usually provide. The current moment becomes unbearable because their body is remembering every previous abandonment and treating this relationship as if those abandonments are happening again. Trauma lives in the body, and the avoidance body holds memories of every time they were left, every time they were hurt, every time vulnerability led to pain. Right now, their body is flooding with these memories, treating current situation as if past abandonments are recurring. Their heart races as if they're about to be left right now. Their stomach churns as if rejection is imminent. Their muscles tense as if they need to fight or flee from danger. These physical responses aren't rational reactions to present reality. They're trauma responses where past and present have collapsed and body is preparing for pain it has experienced before. Right now is terrifying because their body is screaming danger based on past experiences, overriding any rational recognition that you're not the people who hurt them before. The specific fears that are intensifying right now and making them more defended than ever. The avoidance terror in the current moment is driven by specific fears that have intensified to unbearable levels. Understanding these particular fears reveals what's driving the defensive behaviors you're witnessing and what's making right now feel like crisis for their system. They're paralyzed by fear that revealing their terror will make them appear weak and will give you power to manipulate their vulnerability. The avoidant cannot directly express their fear to you because admitting fear feels like handing you ammunition. If they say, "I'm terrified of commitment because I fear losing myself," they believe you'll either use this against them or see them as weak and pathetic. In their experience, showing fear meant being exploited or being shamed. Right now they're trapped. They're terrified, but cannot express terror, cannot ask for help, cannot admit struggle because admission itself feels dangerous. This inability to communicate what they're experiencing creates isolation that intensifies fear. They're alone with their terror, unable to reach out, unable to be honest, managing overwhelming feelings without support because seeking support feels more dangerous than suffering alone. Their dread centers on calendar progressing toward milestones, birthdays, holidays, lease endings that force relationship decisions they're not prepared to make. Right now might be terrifying because specific date is approaching that carries implications they cannot handle. Your birthday approaching and they should plan something special, but planning feels like commitment they're not ready for. Lease ending in 3 months and question of living together is looming and they're panicking about what answer they'll give. Holiday season approaching and they should meet your family, but meeting family feels like relationship becoming serious and permanent. These calendar-based pressures create time-bound terror. They cannot indefinitely avoid decision. Date is approaching, they must choose, and every option feels wrong. Committing feels like trap. Not committing feels like losing you. Time running out on their ability to avoid decision amplifies panic. They're consumed by obsessive thoughts about exit strategies, constantly calculating how they could leave if they needed to escape. Right now, the avoidant is mentally running escape scenarios constantly, how they would break up, what they would say, where they would live, how they would survive without you. These aren't plans they want to execute. They're compulsive mental rehearsals that give them illusion of control. I could leave tomorrow if I needed to. I could move across the country. I could cut all contact. These mental escape plans provide temporary relief from feeling trapped, but the fact that they're constantly thinking this way reveals the intensity of their terror. They're so scared of being unable to escape that they spend enormous energy planning escapes they don't want to take, creating detailed exit strategies that make entrapment feel survivable. The mental energy devoted to exit planning is itself evidence of how scared they are. Their imagination torments them with detailed catastrophic scenarios of abandonment, playing out your eventual betrayal in vivid, painful detail. Right now, the avoidant isn't just generally afraid. They're experiencing specific, vivid imaginings of how you'll hurt them. They imagine discovering you've cheated. They imagine you announcing you've met someone better. They imagine you coldly explaining they were never enough. They imagine you leaving in cruel ways that devastate them. These aren't just passing worries. They're detailed mental movies that play out complete scenarios of abandonment and betrayal. Their mind is showing them in graphic detail exactly how loving you will destroy them, exactly how vulnerable they are to specific types of pain. These vivid, catastrophic fantasies feel real to their nervous system, creating fear response as if these imagined abandonments are actually occurring, making present moment feel dangerous because future pain feels imminent and specific. They're experiencing physical symptoms of panic, insomnia, appetite changes, inability to focus, that they're hiding while acting normal. Right now, the terror isn't just psychological. It's manifesting in their body in ways they cannot control. They're lying awake at night, mind racing about the relationship. They're not eating normally because anxiety has affected appetite. They cannot concentrate at work because thoughts about you and their fear interrupt constantly. They might be experiencing headaches, stomach problems, muscle tension. These physical symptoms reveal severity of their panic, yet they're hiding these symptoms from you, maintaining facade of normalcy while internally falling apart. The gap between how they appear and how they actually feel creates additional stress. They're not just managing terror, they're managing terror while performing wellness, which is exhausting and makes the terror worse. Their fear crystallizes around specific moment when they'll have to explicitly choose you or lose you, knowing they're incapable of choosing without terror. Right now, they're anticipating ultimate confrontation, moment when you'll require clear answer about commitment, when ambiguity can no longer be maintained, when they must explicitly choose to be fully in or acknowledge they're out. This anticipated moment terrifies them because they know they cannot make either choice without terror. Choosing you fully means accepting vulnerability that feels unbearable. Acknowledging they're out means losing you, which also feels unbearable. They're trapped between equally terrifying options, and right now, they're in anticipation period before forced choice, experiencing dread about inevitable moment when they can no longer avoid decision. This anticipatory dread colors every interaction, making present moment feel like countdown to impossible choice. They're terrified by recognition that leaving you would hurt them more than previous breakups, proving they've allowed dangerous level of attachment. The avoidant has left relationships before and recovered relatively quickly. But right now, they recognize leaving you would be different. It would hurt more, would take longer to recover from, would leave deeper wound. This recognition terrifies them because it proves they've allowed level of attachment they've spent life avoiding. If leaving would hurt this much, they're attached at dangerous level. If losing you would be devastating, they failed to protect themselves through maintaining sufficient emotional distance. This recognition that they're more attached than safe attachment allows creates retroactive panic. They've already allowed too much attachment. They're already in danger zone. The damage they fear is already done, because losing you now would hurt in ways previous losses didn't hurt. Their mind is catastrophizing about pressure from friends and family, commenting on relationship, feeling external forces pushing them toward commitment. Right now, social pressure might be intensifying their terror. Your friends asking when you're moving in together, their friends commenting about how serious things seem, family members making remarks about relationship progression, cultural or social expectations about timeline. These external voices create feeling they're being pushed, corralled, pressured by forces beyond their control toward commitment they're not ready for. Even well-meaning comments feel like pressure. Every observation about relationship seriousness feels like walls closing in. Right now is terrifying because it's not just you and their internal fear. Its entire social world seeming to expect progression that their terror makes impossible, creating feeling they're disappointing everyone while also being pushed toward thing they're terrified of. How their terror is manifesting in behaviors that push you away while they're silently panicking. The avoidance terror isn't expressed directly through words or obvious signs of fear. Instead, it manifests in specific behaviors that appear to be rejection or disinterest, but are actually panic responses to the internal terror they're experiencing. Understanding how fear manifests as these behaviors helps you decode what's actually happening beneath the surface. Their panic emerges as sudden overscheduling, filling every available moment with commitments that prevent couple time while avoiding admitting they're creating distance. You notice they're suddenly incredibly busy. Extra work projects, new hobby that requires significant time, plans with friends multiple nights per week, obligations that didn't exist before. Their calendar is mysteriously full, precisely when your relationship would naturally progress toward more time together. This isn't random. It's strategic, though possibly unconscious. They're using busyness as socially acceptable defense against intimacy. They cannot say, I need distance because closeness terrifies me, but they can say, I'm just really busy right now. The overscheduling creates physical space that manages their emotional terror while providing explanation that sounds reasonable, preventing the vulnerable admission that they're scared and need distance to manage that fear. The terror materializes as intensified focus on your flaws, suddenly keeping mental list of everything wrong with you that justifies potential exit. You notice they're mentioning things that bother them about you more frequently. They're pointing out flaws. They're expressing irritation about habits that never bothered them before. They seem to be building case against you. This is terror, manifesting as devaluation defense. Their mind is focusing on negatives to create psychological justification for leaving if they need to escape. Finding flaws makes leaving feel more justified, makes staying feel less essential. It's preemptive protection. If they decide they need to run, they'll have reasons why running was rational choice rather than fear-driven reaction. The flaw focus isn't accurate assessment of you. It's their mind trying to create escape justification while terror about commitment intensifies. Their fear shows up as testing behaviors, pulling away to see if you'll chase, being difficult to see if you'll tolerate it, creating problems to observe your reactions. You notice they cancel plans to see if you'll reschedule. They go cold to see if you'll pursue. They're difficult or demanding to see if you'll accommodate. These aren't conscious manipulations. They're terror-driven tests. Their system needs to know, will you abandon me if I'm not perfect? Will you stay if things get difficult? Can I trust you to not leave? But they cannot ask these questions directly because asking would be too vulnerable. So their system creates situations that test your responses. The tests themselves reveal their terror. They're so afraid of eventual abandonment that they're testing now, trying to predict future, trying to determine if you're safe. The testing is proof of fear, not proof of lack of caring. They're testing because you matter enough that potential loss terrifies them. The panic converts into hypercriticism of the relationship itself, suddenly identifying incompatibilities or problems that would justify ending things. You notice they're questioning whether you're compatible, mentioning differences that seem like relationship killers to them, expressing doubts about whether this can work long term, focusing on problems rather than positives. This relationship criticism is terror manifesting as intellectual justification for escape. Their feeling brain is panicking about commitment, and their thinking brain is trying to create logical reasons why commitment is wrong choice. If they can prove relationship is flawed, leaving becomes rational decision rather than fear-driven flight. They're building intellectual case against relationship, not because relationship is actually wrong, but because their terror needs logical justification to feel less like cowardice and more like reasonable choice, based on legitimate incompatibilities that don't actually exist at level they're claiming. Their terror expresses itself through weaponizing your attachment style, using your anxious tendencies against you as evidence you're too needy or demanding. You notice they're framing your normal relationship needs as excessive. They're calling you needy when you request basic consistency. They're labeling your desire for communication as clingy. They're pathologizing your attachment behaviors that are actually normal responses to their inconsistency. This weaponization of your needs is terror manifesting as blame-shifting defense. Their fear about commitment needs to be someone's fault, and making it your fault through framing you as too needy absolves them while justifying distance. If you're the problem, too needy, too anxious, too demanding, then their withdrawal is justified response to your excess rather than fear-driven avoidance. This blame-shifting protects them from confronting their own terror by making you the cause of distance rather than their fear being the cause. The fear manifests as mysterious mood, shifts where they're fine one moment and withdrawn the next, without explanation you can identify. You notice their emotional state seems to change without external cause. They were warm and present, then suddenly cold and distant. Nothing happened between these states that you can identify. No fight, no stressor, no trigger you caused. These inexplicable mood shifts are terror breaking through their composure. Moments when they're warm, their defenses are down, and they're allowing themselves to feel close to you. Then, their system registers the closeness, triggers fear response, and they withdraw to create safety. The withdrawal isn't response to anything you did. It's response to internal fear that closeness triggered. The unpredictability of these shifts reflects internal battle between their desire for closeness and their terror of it, manifesting as observable mood changes that seem random but are actually fear regulation attempts. Their panic appears as provocative behavior, mentioning exes, flirting with others, behaviors designed to create jealousy or push you to leave first. You notice they mention past relationships more than necessary. They're ambiguous about interactions with others who could be romantic interests. They're doing things that create insecurity or jealousy in you. This provocative behavior is terror manifesting as preemptive ending attempt. If they can make you leave, they control the ending and avoid being the one who runs. If they can create sufficient jealousy or insecurity that you end it, they're protected from their own fear of leaving and from guilt about ending relationship. The provocation is testing maximum version. Can they do something that would make you leave so they don't have to face their terror about choosing to leave or choosing to stay? The behavior that seems designed to hurt is actually protection strategy against their own fear. The terror crystallizes as future avoiding, refusing to make any plans beyond immediate present, treating all discussion of tomorrow as pressure. You notice any mention of future, even next week, is met with vague responses or resistance. They won't commit to plans. They won't discuss upcoming events. They treat any future-oriented conversation as pressure. This future avoidance is terror about commitment extended to all future planning. If they cannot plan next week without terror, they certainly cannot discuss next month or next year. The near future avoidance reveals that even minimal forward commitment triggers their fear. They can only handle right now, today, this moment, because future implies continued relationship, implies ongoing commitment, implies they're choosing to stay. And even these small implications trigger terror that makes future planning impossible. The inability to plan normal near-future activities reveals how acute their fear has become, what their current terror means for the relationship and your response to it. The avoidance terror in the current moment has specific implications for the relationship's trajectory and for how you should respond. Understanding what their terror means helps you make choices that protect yourself while also giving the relationship the best chance if the avoidant can work through their fears. Their terror means you're witnessing real-time psychological crisis that will resolve either through them facing fears or through relationship ending. There's no middle ground. Right now isn't a normal difficult period that will pass with time and patience. It's actual crisis point, where their attachment wounds have been triggered to a degree they cannot maintain status quo. This crisis will resolve in one of two ways. They'll recognize terror is disproportionate to actual threat, seek help to address it, and work toward developing capacity for intimacy. Or they'll follow terror and end relationship to eliminate source of fear. There's no third option where everything continues as is. The crisis has reached intensity that demands resolution. Understanding this helps you recognize the gravity of moment and prepare for either outcome rather than believing you can patience your way through crisis that requires their active choice to face rather than flee from their terror. Their fear indicates you should document their patterns for yourself, keeping record of hot-cold cycles so you can make informed decision based on pattern rather than promises. Right now, while crisis is acute, start keeping notes. When they withdraw, what they say, when they return, what explanations they offer, whether behavior matches words over time. This documentation isn't for confronting them or building case against them. It's for you to maintain clear perception of actual pattern versus distorting influence of hope or isolated good moments. When they're warm, it's easy to forget pattern of coldness. When they make promises, it's tempting to believe this time is different. Notes keep you honest about what's actually happening versus what you hope is happening. This reality checking protects you from making decisions based on potential or on exceptional moments, rather than on actual demonstrated pattern over time. Their panic suggests this moment reveals whether therapy and growth are possibilities they'll pursue or whether wounds are untreated and will remain obstacles. Right now is diagnostic. Their response to this crisis shows you their capacity and their willingness to address their attachment wounds. Do they recognize something is wrong and seek help? Do they acknowledge their patterns and commit to therapy? Do they take responsibility for their terror and work to manage it differently? Or do they blame you, blame circumstances, justify their patterns, refuse help, insist nothing is wrong while behaving in ways that prove something is very wrong? Their choice now reveals whether growth is possibility or whether their wounds are so defended that change is unlikely without external crisis, more severe than this one. This diagnostic information is crucial for your decision about investing further. Their behavior means you need to shift from accommodating their fear to requiring them to manage it appropriately if relationship continues. Up until now, you might have accommodated, giving space when they withdrew, being patient with hot-cold behavior, waiting for them to be ready for next steps. But right now, Their terror has reached level that accommodation enables rather than helps. Shifting to requiring appropriate fear management means they need to identify they're afraid, not blame you or circumstances. They need to communicate their fear appropriately rather than acting it out through withdrawal or provocation. They need to work with professionals to develop tools for managing fear. They need to take responsibility for their patterns rather than expecting you to absorb impact. This shift from accommodation to requirement is necessary because crisis-level terror they're experiencing now proves accommodation hasn't helped them develop better coping and has possibly made it easier for them to avoid addressing their wounds. Their terror means you should prepare emotionally and practically for possible ending while hoping for best but planning for worst. Right now isn't time for optimistic assumptions. It's time for realistic preparation. Consider what you would do if relationship ends, where you would live, how you would manage shared obligations, who your support system would be, how you would move forward. This preparation isn't pessimism, it's self-protection. Having planned for ending doesn't make ending more likely, but not having planned leaves you vulnerable and unprepared if their terror leads them to run. Preparing emotionally means beginning grief process for possible loss, reinforcing your support system, taking care of yourself, not waiting until they decide to start protecting yourself. This protection through preparation is self-care that leaves you less desperate and therefore clearer in your own decisions. Their current state demands you maintain absolute clarity about your non-negotiable needs versus what you're willing to be flexible about. Right now, it's time to get crystal clear with yourself about what you must have in relationship to stay versus what you're willing to accommodate. Non-negotiables might include them acknowledging there's issue and committing to therapy, them communicating about their fear rather than acting it out, them making genuine effort even if imperfect. Flexible areas might include timeline for progress, specific form therapy takes, imperfect implementation of new skills while they're learning. Getting clear about this boundary prevents you from either demanding perfection, which sets them up for failure, or accepting any behavior, which sets you up for continued harm. The clarity helps you hold appropriate boundaries through crisis rather than either being too rigid or too accommodating in response to intensity of their fear. Their panic requires you to consult your own support system, therapist, trusted friends, rather than making decisions in isolation while emotionally overwhelmed. Right now, you're likely experiencing your own intense emotions in response to their crisis, fear about losing them, confusion about their behavior, pain from their withdrawal, anxiety about future, possibly anger about patterns. Making decisions while experiencing these emotions without support or outside perspective risks choices you'll regret. Now is time to lean heavily on your support system. See your therapist more frequently. Talk honestly with trusted friends. Get outside perspectives on situation. Others can see what you cannot see from inside intensity of situation. Others can remind you of your worth when crisis makes you doubt it. Others can provide stability when relationship feels chaotic. Using your support system isn't weakness. It's wisdom in recognizing you need outside perspective and support when navigating crisis this significant. Their terror ultimately means you're receiving clear information about their current capacity that you should believe and respond to appropriately, rather than waiting for capacity that might never develop. Right now, they're showing you who they are and what they're capable of through their response to this crisis. If they're running from fear rather than facing it, if they're blaming rather than taking responsibility, if they're refusing help rather than seeking it, believe this information. This is their current capacity. Don't wait for capacity they might develop someday with work they're not doing. Don't make decisions based on who they could be if they address their wounds. Make decisions based on who they actually are right now as demonstrated by their actual behavior in response to actual crisis. Their terror is real and is understandable given their wounds, but their response to terror shows you their character and their capacity, and you should believe what they're showing you and respond accordingly. Either they're facing their fear and deserve your support through that difficult work, or they're running from fear, and you need to protect yourself by not waiting indefinitely for growth they're not pursuing, while accepting treatment that's harmful to you in the meantime.